Hi, I'm Nina Melendez, and welcome to LinkedIn News Live, a show about the world of work and our place in it. More than 500,000 Americans every year leave prison to rejoin the community at large. Employment is the single biggest factor in reducing recidivism, but after a year of release, up to 60% are still not employed, according to some data. What are the solutions to this problem, and how can companies take advantage of this overlooked talent pool? Well, joining me now is Linda Shaffer. She is the Chief People and Operations Officer at Chekr, an HR tech company that aims to make employment more fair and accessible. She has been at the company for over 6 years. She received her bachelor's from Princeton and her MBA from the Booth School of Business. Linda, welcome.
Thank you. Thanks, Nina.
Linda, so great to have you. Chekr came out with a Fair Chance hiring report, which showed some huge discrepancies and persistent issues with hiring discrimination. What was the main thing you were surprised at discovering when the report was complete?
Yeah, I think one of the things that was most surprising to me was that how much employees really want to do fair chance hiring and employers want to do fair chance hiring, but they just may not really know how to get started. It can be a little daunting if you have never dipped your toe into the world of fair chance hiring to figure out, how do I start with this program? How do I ensure that I'm fair and equitable? And it can be a little scary to get started if you've never done it. So I think for me, it was really about understanding that the interest and the will is there, which I think is a really key place to start.
You know, I want to talk about just some of the discrimination that comes up, and even the word felon that has a negative connotation. And in fact, you and our next guest who's joining pointed it out to me when I said former felon, that's not necessarily the best way to address the population. Can you talk about why and why it's important?
Yeah, I think language is really important. Words matter. And when we use words like felon or even criminal, we are identifying like one action that took place in someone's life, and we are attaching it to their whole being versus thinking about, look, these are individuals. They have been impacted by our criminal justice system. They are trying to return to the world of employment and to the world that the free world that we live in, and calling them a felon puts a label on them that is hard to erase. So we like to think about these broader terms because we really believe that having a criminal conviction or having a conviction history should not be a life sentence to unemployment.
And about unemployment, you know, there is the background checks that happen. Are background checks themselves the problem to getting employment?
Yeah, background checks are part of the employment process, whether we like it or not. It is in many industries required by states and regulators as part of employment. And background checks in themselves are not the problem. It's often more the way in which they are applied. One of the things that we have done at Chekr is try to build a product that makes it easy for employers and folks that are hiring to take bias out of the hiring process and to more thoughtfully consider which part of that background check is really relevant and important to the particular employment being considered. And I think that is really the key difference between maybe background checks being considered like bad and evil and really trying to figure out how to make this just one part of the employment process and one that can increase fairness and access to employment.
Linda, I want to pause the conversation very quickly and say hi to some of the folks who are joining us from around the world, actually. We've got Aisha from Abu Dhabi, Sudhir from India, Karen from Arkansas, Anne from Washington, and Regina from Texas. If anyone has any questions, I'm speaking with Linda Shaffer from Chekr, and we're discussing resources and ways to make hiring more equitable, specifically for folks with former convictions. Linda, let's talk about ban the box. It's a law that makes it illegal to include questions about criminal history on job applications. How widespread is this law, and is it enough?
Yeah, I mean, ban the box laws are in place about 37 states in the US. It was a well-meaning attempt to try to minimize information about someone's conviction history to come into the employment history. But we've really found it's not enough. In our research, we have found that very often executives, even at the end of a process, when learning of a conviction, will do their own independent research about an individual and may make conclusions based on their internet research. So just in themselves, it is the beyond the box laws themselves, while perhaps well-meaning, are really insufficient in the goal of making the actual hiring process more fair and equitable.
Is it because eventually the question does come up in the either interview process and afterwards?
Yeah, the process, it does come up in the interview process, or maybe even in the interview process, but not explicitly stated. This is why we think an important part of the hiring process is to get the story of the candidate and to ask them explicitly about information that may come up in their background check, and understand the context in which they're operating. Our product, as an example, has a place as part of the background check for that information to come into the hiring process, so that it can be thoughtfully considered.
And what's the overall sentiment from employees about fair chance hiring?
Yeah,
From
I mean,
employees within
yeah.
companies, colleagues?
Yeah, I mean, I can speak directly to that at Chekr. We have a fair chance hiring program ourselves. In 2021, we had about 6% of our employees who are fair chance employees. And I can tell you that they are some of the best employees that we have. We have higher retention rate among these employees. We have higher promotion rates. We have more mobility in the company. And we have found that they are very loyal employees as well, which, especially, in the tech world where folks are hopping around a lot, it can be really valuable to have folks who are really dedicated to the company. But more than that, I think that the other thing that fair chance hiring has done for us at Chekr is it has helped us really open up a conversation about inclusivity and what does it mean to be in a workplace with people who have all different kinds of backgrounds. And that has been good overall for I would say, just like our overall culture at the company.
And
So
what about? Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Sorry, go ahead.
No, I was gonna say it's very well received, and it's, in many ways, I think it is part of what actually attracts employees to come to Chekr, as part of this. They buy into this mission and purpose of giving people a fair chance. So it's actually become something that helps us as a company compete in the market.
And what about corporate attitudes? How is that changing, if at all?
Yeah, I think corporate attitudes are changing in part because they have to. Like, the business world that we live in, the labor market is extremely tight. And if you, as a business, exclude the 1 in 3 Americans that have a criminal record, you are excluding a vast number of really eligible workers for your business. So I think there's a reality, there's an economic imperative that employees need and want to consider these groups, and they want help in figuring out how to do it in a way that is, just like appropriate for their business. They're worried about maybe making mistakes, not just because they feel like it might be a risk, but more just like how are my other employees think about this. So I think there is a change process to do this well, but I think from the employer side, there is definitely an appetite to try to figure it out. And we see that we work with some of the largest employers in the country, and they are really interested in making this work.
And I imagine also with the pandemic and the talent shortage that we've seen because of it, that there is this huge talent pool that just needs to be tapped into, that I imagine corporate America can really take advantage of.
Yes, there's a huge talent pool, and it is also, if it intersects with other corporate goals around diversity. Because if you look at the intersection between people who have been justice impacted and people are of color, Black Americans, other underrepresented groups, those groups are disproportionately justice impacted. So if you have a diversity program, you have to be thinking about fair chance.
I have a question for you, Linda, from one of our members, which is a question that I had for you as well, but I'm going to ask it from Keon, who says, how can I market myself to jobs knowing that I have a criminal background? So great question from Keon. How can folks who do have a criminal background market themselves to potential employers?
Yeah, I mean, I think, one is doing research on companies who are open and have active fair chance hiring programs. Chekr is one of them. Many of our customers are fair chance employers in the gig economy. We're going to hear later from Richard Bronson from 70 Million Jobs. Like, they have a huge job platform for folks who have been justice impacted. I think the other thing I would say is that working with our own team who has been justice impacted, I can say it's very scary as an individual going into an employer and having an honest conversation about your background. And from my own experience, the ability to take risk and being just really candid about what was your situation and where are you now goes a long way with potential employers. So I know that it can be scary, and I know that not every employer is open to it, but in my own experience, that has helped really build a foundation of trust between managers and employees.
And before I let you go, what are some common misconceptions about hiring folks with criminal records?
Yeah, I think that one of the most common misconceptions is that if I hire someone with a criminal record, the risk is that they are going to commit a crime and it's going to impact, my business, my workforce or something. That is just not true. In fact, employment is the thing that is critical to prevent recidivism, because you're giving people the opportunity to earn money in a legitimate way, like to support their families. So that I think that's probably the biggest misconception, that that somehow the risk of recidivism is the risk I need to worry about. I think on the opposite, as I mentioned earlier, we have seen through our own experience that in fact, these are some of the best employees we have. And that risk is really just inconsequential.
Linda, thank you so much. I want to close our conversation with a comment from Humberto, who says, I became a felon 5 years ago through a very silly mistake. My resume speaks volumes. I've gotten great job offers based on my skills and experiences, but the background check always stops me in my tracks. This needs to change. So thank you for that insight, Humberto. And Linda, thank you for joining us here on LinkedIn News Live.
Thank you so much. Thanks, Nina.
That was Linda Shaffer. She is Chief People and Operations Officer at Chekr. Now let's talk to someone who is closely tied to the community of folks with convictions and knows firsthand what it's like to be impacted by the criminal justice system. Richard Bronson, he is the founder and CEO of 70 Million Jobs, the first national for-profit employment platform for people with records, as well as the Commissary Club, a social network for 70 million Americans with criminal records. He's also host of the virtual Hangout the Yard, a weekly meeting where people with records can gather together to connect and offer support. He spent 2 years in federal prison for securities violations, and he was just named top influencer in DEI by Staffing Industry Analysts. Richard, thank you for joining the show.
Thanks so much for having me.
I ran out of breath talking about all your accolades here.
I know it's been quite a life. I just want to point out to Linda, who I am a huge fan of, her personally and her company, that while I am also a fan of Richard Branson, my name is Richard Bronson.
Not to be confused with
I have so many LinkedIn connections, to be honest with you, that I am sure related to that, misconception, but I'm just who I am.
Richard, let's talk about 70 Million Jobs. Tell me a little bit more about the organization.
Yeah, thank you. As you mentioned, I did time. I was very, very successful. I worked on Wall Street. And, I did very, very well, but I was greedy and stupid. And I paid the price dearly for it. I lost everything, family, friends, my freedom. And when I got out of prison, I was homeless and I was destitute. And I had to face firsthand the daunting challenges of getting back on my feet, including getting a job. And, here I am, a white male in white corporate America with a good college education and a lot of job experience. And for me, it was almost impossible to get a job. What are the chances for the guys I was in prison with, who were overwhelmingly young men of color who had limited education and job experience? And as I later learned, there are not many options for them. When I went through prison, it's sort of the one thing it gave me was an insight into what my calling in life was, and that's to help my brothers and sisters in and out of prison so that they may have options. I worked on the nonprofit side for a while, but I wasn't really convinced we were having enough impact. And I thought this was a space, the reentry space, that was ripe for disruption. So I reasoned, let's do this as a for-profit venture. Not only should it be a good business, but we can attract folks who are much more aggressive and accountable, and maybe we could get something done. Because the truth is, we couldn't do much worse. The rate of recidivism, as Linda and you have alluded to, is off the chart, and it doesn't show signs of improvement. If someone gets a job, they typically will stay out of trouble and live happily ever after. Contrary-wise, if they don't get a job, they will almost certainly be rearrested and go back to prison. Like 3 out of 4 people, go that path. So I felt like we got to do something about this. So I launched the first national for-profit employment platform for folks with records. And I was very fortunate. Y Combinator asked me to go through their program and help me raise money to launch my company. And we had stunning success. We were able to facilitate employment for thousands of deserving men and women who all continue to work and lead successful lives. Unfortunately, the pandemic had a fairly devastating impact on our business. But nonetheless, we got a lot done.
When you are having conversations with people in your network, when you're hosting the yard conversations on Zoom, what are some of the biggest pain points that you're hearing about the difficulty in obtaining jobs, and what is something that you feel like people should understand about that difficulty?
Well, I think as I think Linda also alluded to, the attitudes and the zeitgeist in this country is evolving and changing. Things like Black Lives Matter helped and continue to help. And certainly the economic, state of the job market right now is certainly driving many, many companies to, reconsider the unthinkable, and that's to hire people with records. But there are so many myths out there regarding this population, that I faced head on. One is that people who have records will always get into trouble, that they're somehow different. It's us versus them. But what happened in this country, and it was mostly through the war on drugs, is like really good families were finding that uncles and aunts and college kids, they were getting arrested too. So it was no longer them versus us. What happens when them becomes us? You got to start changing your thinking, and people have done that. Now, has it been quick enough and enough? Are we all the way there? Not at all. But in the 15 years that I've been out of prison, I've seen a sea change in attitude. And I expect that it will continue as more and more companies recognize that hiring these folks is not only the right thing to do from a corporate responsibility point of view, not only does it send an incredibly positive message to the towns and cities and communities in which you do business, but it also results in an improvement to your workforce. As Linda pointed out, and there's a great study that SHRM, the Society for Human Resource Management, does every year along with the Koch Foundation. They discovered that hiring managers at the biggest companies believe overwhelmingly that this population, when hired, are as good as, if not better, than people without records. And that's certainly counterintuitive. But as Linda pointed out again, and next time we do this, I hope I'll go first so I can all the great points.
Linda still didn't steal your thunder. Don't worry, Richard.
It's all right. I want to take her on a sales call. She's that good. But, their retention is better and they work harder because they can't assume there's another job waiting for them. So when you get performance and retention, that's an HR home run. So getting over this thought that the people who have records are somehow, damaged genetically is a centuries old myth. It's just not true at all.
I want to say hi to some folks who are joining and are commenting in the stream. Wesley from Colorado, Leontine from Ohio, Chanela from Georgia. Thank you for joining. Lois from Canada, Sharon from Florida, and Luca from Italy. We've got a worldwide audience with us. And T. Holloway is saying a misconception about hiring former people with records is that they are still guilty enough not to earn a living. That's very powerful.
Well, it's a great point that he makes, in that from a purely practical point of view, 90 some odd % of people in prison are going to be released. And at least in America, you better have a job or some access to finances, because you need to eat and pay the rent and take your kids to the doctor. And if we let people out of prison and there's no plan for them to actually get a job, what do we expect will happen?
Yeah.
It's like the old thing about walking outside in the rain without an umbrella, that you keep doing it. That's the definition of insanity. Well, if we don't make a plan for preparing people for their release, because it's certain, then what are we setting ourselves up for? And one last point, when you consider, like in New York, where I'm from, to incarcerate somebody in Rikers Island, where I actually did some time too, is over $400,000 a year is spent to do that. You mean to tell me we couldn't take 50 grand and train someone so that they don't have to go back? That wouldn't be better business? It's insane.
Better allocation of resources, in my opinion, as well.
You would think.
Yeah. So let's talk about those jobs. What are some of the best jobs for folks out there who have a criminal background?
Well, listen, for those people who have a criminal background, who get out and who have prior training, their advantages are hugely greater than those without the training and the job experience. I mean, there's lots of people who are doing time who have, particularly for drug infractions, who are in the tech world. Those people don't typically have that much trouble getting jobs. The job they get will be lower than they would have had without the record, probably. But they're people who have educations, they have job experiences, they have a sophistication, they know what to do. The problems really exist for those who got arrested at a young age and have spent most of their adolescence and early adulthood in prison, whereby they haven't gotten real good with computers. They don't know how to do a job search. They don't have a resume. And if they do have a resume, it's got gaping holes in it. So my advice is always, the minute, there's an old saying that a person's reentry isn't the day that they leave. It doesn't begin the day they leave prison. It should begin the day they go into prison. And the smartest people use this time really effectively by taking advantage of each and every training opportunity and class they can take and all of this stuff. Some places are good with it, many places aren't. But for that, wherever there is something for you to learn, not only is it like a healthy way to spend your time in prison rather than just sitting around, but if you can get trained or licensed or certified in anything, you will have a huge leg up and a place to start, particularly in this economy. So if you don't take advantage, when else are you going to have this much time off in your life? If you don't take advantage, shame on you. So that's what people should be doing.
Richard, we have to close the conversation, but I want to end on a couple of thoughts. We've got Andrea, who is saying, thank you for opening the conversation to giving everyone a fair chance. And Humberto, again, our friend Humberto, who's watching, says, if anyone here is also a felon, don't give up. Don't let all of the no's and rejections stop you. There will always be a way. Be patient and keep trying. So thank
Amen,
you,
brother,
for that. And thank you, Richard, for joining us here on LinkedIn News Live.
Thanks so much for having me.
That was Richard Bronson, not Branson. He's CEO and founder of 70 Million Jobs and the Commissary Club. And you can check out his conversation on Zoom called The Yard. And thanks to everyone for joining the show. I'm sorry we couldn't get to everyone's comments and questions. You can continue the conversation here, make connections, or if you'd like, you can check out some of our other stories to the right of the news feed. If you're on mobile, just click into the search box. I'm Nina Melendez. Thank you so much for watching LinkedIn News Live.